Hello, my friends. Good afternoon. Well, here we are at Tuesday of Holy Week, and we are on the week of solemn attention. Our Christian discipline, our walk in this life as Christians. If we're going to live our life as Christians, then that means that we pay attention to Jesus. Christians means we are followers of Christ. And we walk in the way that he walks ahead of us. So having come through the season of Lent, approaching now day 35 of Lent, we turn our attention from ourselves to Christ, to Jesus. This week, we pay attention to what happened in Jesus' life. We read and reread. We listen and listen again to the nuances of what was said, what was recorded as having been said, and then what wasn't said. And through it, we coalesce, we gather up all of what it means to have our lives in the hands of God. So, on what we call Palm Sunday, Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a donkey in a simple, humble way, signifying the way some kings entered, but nothing else about his entrance marked him out as a powerful person or a king. He was lauded by people. People got excited like a celebrity. He made it inside the gates. He went to the temple. He was considered a rabbi, so it's not unusual for him to go to the temple. He went there. That's a great pilgrimage to arrive at the temple in Jerusalem on the week of Passover. This is it. This is where all the meaning for Hebrews' lives, for Jewish lives, come together in this celebration of Passover. On that Passover in Jerusalem. And Jesus goes to the temple, he looks around, and then he leaves. What happened on Monday? We pay attention to the details of his life then. He went to the religious establishment and expressed his extreme dissatisfaction with the state of the religious establishment. He just, an extreme disappointment. And not around little things like what prayers they prayed or what they didn't pray, but his disappointment was around the lack of hospitable welcome to people who were not Jewish and people who were not from that region. I cannot emphasize enough. The God of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the Bible, the resultant narrative about God is that God is concerned about hospitality, about human beings finding home and safety and food, living a secure life. This is a number one concern of God's. When the Bible talks about injustice, people say to me, well, how do you can talk about justice? What is justice, right? They're having the trial of in Minneapolis today for Derek Chauvin, seeking justice. What is justice? What is justice? Well, there are a lot of applications of justice, but in the biblical narrative, in the story of Jesus, in the narrative of the God of the Bible, of Abram and Sarah, the concerns of justice have to do with food for people who are hungry, income security, health, a reasonable environment provided whereby a human being can thrive. This is justice. This is God's justice. It's not invented by a political party or anything else. It's there. It's on the pages, all the pages of the Bible. Jesus on Monday expressed his extreme dissatisfaction that the direction of the religious community, of the practicing religious community that named Yahweh as the God they worshiped, had turned attention away from the problem of immigrants and immigrancy and homeless people, homeless because of nation or wars or whatever. They had turned their attention away from providing a welcome, a shelter to sojourners. That's what they were called, sojourners. And then further, to widows and orphans, to people who were vulnerable, people who were outside, dropped off the end of the social caring web, net. Jesus expresses extreme outrage that the instruments of religion in God's name would be used to actually add to people's struggle, creating more struggle. It's still infuriating. At one point, Jesus confronts those religious authorities and says to them, "You do nothing in your life but go around and make up heavy burdens and pile them on people's backs. And you do nothing to help them lift the load that you've created." This is Passion Week, my friends. Jesus releases a lot of his own personal passion at this point. So that's Sunday. Then we talked about this yesterday on Monday, and now Tuesday. What happens on Tuesday? Well, on Tuesday, Jesus has regathered himself. He's out now with his friends beyond Jerusalem, and he's making plans for how he is going to celebrate the Passover. And he gives his disciples instructions that somewhere in Jerusalem, we don't really know how he knows about this, but somewhere inside the city gates there is a room in the upper portion of a house that's large enough for a banquet to be held. And we call it the upper room. It was a second floor walk up. Jesus gives instructions to his disciples on Tuesday that they are to find that room, make arrangements with the homeowner, that they, the disciples, and I don't think it was just the male disciples, I think there were women as well who were really a part of Jesus' entourage, and that they were going to gather in that upper room and they were going to celebrate the Passover. Now, the Passover begins on the Sabbath once a year. There is an annual narrative telling of the events that were life-changing and life-shaping, a huge interaction between God and human beings. Passover was the final act that released the captives in Egypt. Now, thousands of years before, the story is still told every year. The captives were released. After signs and wonders, the river was turned to blood, the plague of locusts and the plague of frogs, all the different kinds of problems that came and fell upon Egypt because Pharaoh was refusing to let the children go into the wilderness to celebrate, to pray. That's all Moses asked Pharaoh for. Give us 2 days to go into the wilderness and to sacrifice to Yahweh so that we don't lose our story. And Pharaoh thought it was a plot, that they were going to go into the desert, they were going to, sacrifice, and then they were going to take off. And he just kept saying no, 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 no. And so Moses' threat became greater and greater to say, you're going to be sorry. Don't mess with God of these people. This God has created this people, and will defend them and will take care of them. So on that final conversation between Moses and Pharaoh, Pharaoh said, if you don't stop this, I'm going to kill the firstborn of every Israelite children, every Israelite child. The firstborn of every child, I'm going to take their life. And that will put an end to this. And Moses was like, I wish you wouldn't have said that, because the curse that you were going to bring on us is now going to fall on you. So that night, according to the narrative of Passover, there were people that went through Egypt, they went through the whole community, and they warned that night was going to be a night of death. And that if you wanted to avoid the angel of death, you would put blood on the lintel, that archway that holds the doorway open. You would put blood on the lintel, marking that you were a household who believed in Yahweh. You were ready to put your life and your hand, you were marking yourself out as a follower of Yahweh. Now, on that night, a lot of people became Jewish. On that night, it didn't matter if you had the direct tradition of being a descendant of Abraham and Sarah or not. It didn't have been 400 years. You want to be a part of this rescue? Put lentil on your door, get in with a family, and they will then eat a lamb with you. They'll know how to do it, and you'll be spared. And so every household that performed that ritual that night was spared, and every household that did not, the eldest born child died, including Pharaoh's eldest child. In his grief, Pharaoh said, I give up, you can go. They left, and they didn't just leave, they took all of the riches of Egypt with them. They took the gold and the jewelry, and they just packed up and took the animals, and that's it, they went out. They didn't know where they were going. Moses was leading them generally in a direction east, headed towards the river. And they went out a day's journey into the desert that night. They were in the desert where they encamped, and they built little temporary shelters called booths. And that night they prayed and thanked God for their deliverance and prayed for their continued salvation. And in the morning, when they got up, they were pressed up against the Red Sea. And looking back, they saw that Pharaoh had changed his mind, and he had sent out legions of soldiers. And they were bearing down on them, and certain they were going to just kill them and take all the spoils back. And so Moses prayed, and God told him to strike the water with the stick. The water parted. The refugees were able to scramble across the river, and it was dry because of a wind that blew. They got to the other side, and the soldiers entered the Red Sea, the river behind them, and then God withdrew what was holding the water up, and the soldiers were destroyed. That is Passover. That event, that salvation event, is what was remembered every year in ritual. The details of it were told from adult to child, from child to child's children. It was part of their identity. We are now. Who are we now? We are the people who were saved by God in miraculous ways from the encroaching and certain death of the Egyptians on us. God brought the angel of death. It passed over us. It did not kill us. And instead, it killed the Egyptians' children and therefore led to our release. This was the day. This Friday night, I don't know how this calendar works out. But we celebrate the Passover meal on Thursday, which is unusual because the Passover of Sabbath doesn't begin until Friday at sundown. Or maybe the Passover meal happens that night before. I'll have to check that. You write to me, you tell me. But so on Tuesday, Jesus is making arrangements for where they are going to celebrate Passover. With the whole retelling of the story, every piece of food at the table was another way of telling the narrative of what happened and telling the children about, so they would know the story that had created their identity. Jesus was Jewish. He was a child rescued from Egypt. He knew the salvation acts of God in history, and Jesus was planning to celebrate and remember the Passover. And on that Tuesday, there were arrangements being made. The disciples were sent into town to make arrangements for where they would meet for the Passover. Meanwhile, Judas, one of the 12 men disciples, it became clear to Jesus and to some of the others that Judas was becoming severely disaffected with what was happening. Some have argued that Judas was trying to force Jesus' hand. Some have said that he really was intending to just betray Jesus. You can read between the lines, but the facts are that it was probably on this Tuesday that Judas went to the religious authorities and said, listen, you don't know where he is right now, but I will show you. I will take you to him. And the deal was made for the famous 30 pieces of silver in order to betray him. They paid for Jesus to be turned over to them. Now, on Tuesday, Jesus wasn't really hiding. They didn't know where he was. He wasn't in Jerusalem, but he was coming to Jerusalem. And so Judas was making a plan to alert the religious authorities so they would know where to come to arrest him. In our telling of it, the Passover meal was celebrated, and then Jesus, as we'll talk about tomorrow, went out to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. So the preparations are being made. This is our day to prepare too. It's our day to prepare, to really focus on the intentionality of Jesus. What were the issues that ultimately became the cause of his death? In our traditions today, we talk about how he died to save us from our sins. I'm not disagreeing with that, but somehow when you say that, you have to understand what was it that they saw? What did they see him doing? What is the story that was presented? What are our sins? And what is this saving? This saving, not like a saving of Exodus. It's not like, they were in bondage and then they were freed. This is a different kind of saving. This is the rest of the saving of human beings. The preparation for the Passover meal. And then for the power of this week, the Passion Week, as I said, is a week where we turn away from thinking about who we are and our own imperfections and all the things that we're going to bring and be able to confess and seek forgiveness for. And now we turn to look full on at Jesus, what he does, and ask God to allow the full meaning of his life-saving events to fill our lives and to guide us as we continue on this journey. Time shot by quickly for me today. This week is going by very fast, and I hope that for you, that you are doing well. The seasons outside are beginning to be more and more favorable. I pray that you're staying safe, and I pray, as always, that God is blessing you, that God is bringing good things into your life, and that through those good things you are being empowered to be a good thing, to do a good thing for others in the way God is loving the world. God bless you, my friends. I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye for now.